Under the moonlit Georgia sky, Meera Johnson prays for freedom from plantation life, unaware that Graham Southwood, the plantation heir with a gentle heart unlike his cruel father, is listening. Their dangerous journey toward freedom becomes an unexpected path to love and self-discovery as they risk everything for a chance at a new life. Join us for this tale of courage, sacrifice, and the power of seeing someone for who they truly are. Before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The Southwood plantation stretched as far as the eye could see under the Georgia moonlight. Fields of cotton swayed gently in the night breeze, a deceptively peaceful sight that hid the harsh reality of life for those who worked them. Meera Johnson was 22, with dark brown eyes that had seen too much suffering and hands calloused from endless work. Every night after her long day of labor, whenever anyone else had gone to sleep, she would slip away to her special place behind the old smokehouse. It was the only moment of peace she had in her difficult life. Tonight was no different. Meera knelt on the ground, her simple cotton dress spread around her. She closed her eyes and pressed her fingers into the cool earth. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the night, "if you see me, if I'm not invisible to you, then just one day, let me belong to no one but myself." She didn't know that someone was listening. Graham Southwood, the 26-year-old heir to the plantation, often walked the grounds at night when he couldn't sleep. He was nothing like his father, Edward Southwood, a man known throughout the county for his cruelty and iron fist. Graham had his mother's gentle nature, a quality his father saw as weakness. Graham hadn't meant to eavesdrop. He had been walking, lost in thought about the argument he'd had with his father earlier that day. Edward wanted him to be tougher on the workers, to act like a real Southwood, but Graham couldn't bring himself to be the man his father wanted. He froze when he heard Meera's prayer. Without thinking, he spoke into the darkness. "I'll free you." Meera jumped to her feet, ready to run. Her heart pounded in her chest. Being caught alone at night could mean severe punishment. But then she saw who it was, as not the master, but his son. Graham stood there in the moonlight, tall and lean, with kind eyes that seemed out of place on a Southwood face. "Why would you say that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I heard your prayer," he replied simply. "And I can't pretend I didn't." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Meera barely slept that night. She tried to convince herself that it had been a dream. The Graham Southwood hadn't really promised to free her. Such things didn't happen, not to people like her. The next day passed in a blur of work and worry. Meera picked cotton until her fingers bled, all the while glancing nervously toward the main house. She jumped every time she saw movement, afraid it might be Graham. What if he told his father about finding her alone at night? What if it had been some cruel joke? As the sun began to set, Meera finished Heir work and headed back to the small cabin she shared with 3 other women. She hung her apron on a hook by the door, and something fell to the floor. A folded piece of paper. With shaking hands, she picked it up and moved to the window, where the last light of day allowed her to read the neat handwriting. "There's land in Tennessee where no one owns anyone. I'll take you there. Say yes, and I'll make it true." Meera quickly hid the note in her dress pocket. Her mind raced. Was this real? Could she trust him? Or was it a trap? For the next 3 days, Meera avoided Graham. Whenever she saw him coming, she would duck behind a building or busy herself with work. But each night she found another note hidden beneath her apron. The second note read, "I know you're afraid. You have every right to be. But I promise you this is real." The third, "My father leaves for business in Atlanta on Friday. We could be gone before he returns." The fourth, "Please give me an answer. Meet me tonight at the smokehouse if you want to talk." Meera didn't go. Instead, she wrote her own note, her letters rough and uneven, having taught herself to read and write in secret. "If this is a game, please end it. I can't survive hope." She left it where she had found his notes, under her apron. The next evening, his response was waiting. "This is not a game. Hope is the only thing that made me start listening." That night, Meera finally went to the smokehouse. Graham was already there, sitting on an old stump, his face brightening when he saw her. "You came," he said, standing quickly. "I shouldn't be here," Mira replied, keeping her distance. "Why are you doing this? Why would you help me?" Graham ran a hand through his dark hair. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because I can't stand what my father does. Because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because that night when I heard you pray, it was like hearing my own thoughts spoken aloud." Mira studied his face, looking for signs of deception. "Your father would kill you if he knew." "Probably," Graham admitted with a sad smile. "But I've never stood up to him before. Maybe it's time I did." They talked for an hour that night, not about escape plans, but about themselves. Graham told her about his mother, who had died when he was 12, leaving him alone with his cruel father. Mira told him about her family, how she'd been separated from them years ago. "My sister Sarah was sold when she was 15, Mira said, her voice breaking. "I don't even know if she's alive." Graham reached out as if to touch her hand, but stopped himself. "I'm sorry. I can't change what's happened, but I can help you now." Over the next 2 weeks, they met every few nights. Each time, Mira found herself trusting Graham a little more. He wasn't what she had expected. He was educated and had traveled to Europe, yet he spoke to her as an equal, listened to her ideas, and valued her thoughts. "My father's going to Atlanta next Tuesday," Graham told her during one of their meetings. "He'll be gone for at least 3 days. That's our chance." "Where exactly would we go?" Mira asked. "I have a friend in Tennessee, a man who believes as I do that slavery is wrong. He'll help us get farther north if needed. I've been saving money and I sold my pocket watch yesterday." "You did?" Graham nodded. "We'll need money for the journey. I've also been gathering supplies, food, warm clothes for you. It's all hidden in the old hunting cabin by the creek." Hope was dangerous. Mira knew that. But for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to feel it. "I have to ask," she said quietly. "Why me? There are others here who need Ephraim too." Graham looked at her intently. "I can't save everyone, not yet. But I heard your prayer that night. It was like it woke something in me. I know that doesn't make sense. But it did make sense to Mira. Something had changed between them in these secret meetings. Something unnamed but powerful. Their plans were coming together. Graham had arranged for a wagon. They would leave after midnight next Tuesday, travel under cover of darkness, and be in Tennessee before anyone realized they were gone. Then everything fell apart. Edward Southwood returned from his business trip a day early. As he was going through some papers in his study, he found a map of Tennessee that Graham had forgotten to put away. And tucked inside the map was one of the notes Graham had written to Mira. Graham was having dinner alone in the dining room when his father stormed in, his face red with fury. "What is this?" "Edward," demanded, throwing the note onto the table. Graham's blood ran cold. "Father, I can explain." "Explain." Edward's voice was dangerously quiet. "Explain how my son, my own flesh and blood, is planning to steal my property and run away like a thief in the night." "She's not property," Graham shouted, standing up so quickly his chair fell backward. "She's a human being with hopes and dreams and—" The slap came so fast, Graham didn't have time to dodge it. He staggered back, his cheek burning. "You disgust me," Edward spat. "No son of mine would betray his family for a slave. Is that what this is about? Have you developed some perverted attraction to her?" "It's not like that," Graham said, though in his heart he wasn't so sure anymore. What did he feel for Mira? It was more than just wanting to help her. The thought of never seeing her again made his chest ache. "I've heard enough," Edward declared. "I'm sending you to your uncle's plantation in Mississippi until you come to your senses. And as for this girl," he looked at the note again. "Mira, she'll be sold at auction tomorrow." "No." Graham lunged forward, but his father was already calling for the overseer. "Lockwood, get in here!" The burly overseer appeared at the door. "Yes, sir?" "My son is not to leave this house tonight. Post men at every door." "Father, please," Graham begged. "Don't do this." But Edward Southwood had already turned away, his mind made up. Graham was trapped. His father's men watched the house, and there was no way for him to warn Mira. As night fell, he paced his room like a caged animal, desperate to find a way out. Meanwhile, Mira had finished her day's work and was heading back to her cabin when Martha, one of the house servants, grabbed her arm. "Mira, you need to hide," Martha whispered urgently. "Master Edward found out about you and Master Graham. He's selling you tomorrow first thing." Mira's world collapsed around her. "Where's Graham?" "Locked in the house. There are men guarding every door." Mira knew she should run. She could try to escape on her own, head for the swamps where the search dogs would lose her scent. But the thought of leaving without seeing Graham one last time was unbearable. "I need to see him," she decided. "Are you crazy?" Martha's eyes widened. "They'll catch you for sure." "I have to try." As darkness fell over the plantation, Mira made her way carefully toward the main house. She knew its layout from the times she'd been called to work there. Graham's room was on the second floor, with a large oak tree growing near his window. The tree was old, with thick branches that stretched toward the house. Mira had climbed trees all her life, but never one this big, never at night and never with so much at stake. She waited until the guard at the back of the house walked around the corner, then darted across the open space and began to climb. The rough bark scraped her hands, but she kept going, branch by branch, until she reached the one closest to Graham's window. She could see him inside, pacing back and forth. Holding her breath, she tapped softly on the glass. Graham spun around, his eyes widening when he saw her. He rushed to the window and pushed it a pen. "Mira, what are you doing?" "If they catch you." "I heard what happened," she whispered. "Martha told me." Graham's face was filled with anguish. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I should have been more careful." "There's no time for that now," Mira said. "I need to go tonight. Will you come with me?" Graham looked back at his bedroom door. "They're watching me, but..." His expression changed as an idea formed. "Wait there." He disappeared from the window, returning moments later with a rope made from tied-together bedsheets. "My father thinks he can control me, but he's wrong," Graham said, a new determination in his voice. "I'm coming with you." He secured one end of the makeshift rope to his heavy oak bed and threw the other end out the window. Then he grabbed a small bag he had already packed and slung it over his shoulder. "Meet me at the old hunting cabin," he told Mira. "I hid supplies there, remember? Go now. I'll be right behind you." Mira climbed down the tree, while Graham prepared to escape using his rope. Their eyes met one last time before she disappeared into the darkness. Heart pounding, Mira made her way through the familiar fields toward the hunting cabin by the creek. She kept to the shadows, freezing at every sound. When she finally reached the small wooden structure, she slipped inside and waited. An hour passed, then another. Had Graham been caught? Was he being punished because of her? The thought made her sick with worry. Finally, she heard footsteps approaching. The door creaked open, and Graham appeared, breathless and disheveled, but alive. "They almost caught me," he gasped, "but I made it." Mira rushed to him without thinking, throwing her arms around him. For a moment they clung to each other, the reality of what they were doing finally sinking in. Graham pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." "I'm sure," Mira said firmly. "But what about you? You're giving up everything. Your home, your inheritance, your future." Graham shook his head. "I'm not giving up my future. I'm choosing it." He took her hand gently, as if it were made of glass. "We need to go. My father will discover I'm gone by morning, and he'll send men after us." Mira nodded. She had spent her whole life on this plantation, and now she was about to leave it forever. It should have felt frightening, but with Graham beside her it felt like freedom. As they prepared to set out into the night, Graham turned to her one last time. "You prayed to be seen," he said softly. "I see you, Mira, and I won't stop until you're free." Together they stepped out into the darkness, leaving behind the only world they had ever known, heading toward an uncertain future that for the first time held hope. The night enveloped Graham and Mira as they made their way through the woods behind the Southwood plantation. Graham led a small, sturdy horse, pulling a cart covered with canvas. Underneath, he had hidden food, water, blankets, and the money he'd managed to save. "We need to stay off the main roads," Graham whispered as they navigated through the trees. My father will send men in that direction first. Mira nodded, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Every snapping twig made her jump. She had never been this far from the plantation before, and the vastness of the night terrified her almost as much as the thought of being caught. "How long until we reach Tennessee?" she asked. "If we travel fast and don't run into trouble, 3 days," Graham replied. "I have a friend there, James Cooper. He runs a small farm near the border. He'll help us." The first night of their journey passed in tense silence. They traveled until the sky began to lighten, then found a secluded spot deep in the woods to rest during the day. Graham spread a blanket on the ground for Mira. "You should sleep," he told her. "I'll keep watch." "What about you?" "I'll be fine," he assured her, though the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. Mira lay down but couldn't sleep. Everything felt strange. The sounds of the foresight, the feeling of being away from the plantation, and most of all, being alone with Graham. He sat with his back against a tree, a small pistol resting in his lap. "Where did you get that?" Mira asked, eyeing the weapon. "It was my grandfather's," Graham said. "I hope we won't need it." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, exhaustion finally overtook Mira. She drifted off to sleep with the strange but comforting knowledge that someone was watching over Heir. She woke to Graham gently shaking her shoulder. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "It's time to go," he said. "I heard horses on the main road about an hour ago. We need to keep moving." They ate a quick meal of bread and dried meat, then continued their journey northward. The second night was colder, and a light rain began to fall, soaking through their clothes. Mira shivered but didn't complain. Anything was better than being caught and taken back. "Here," Graham said, noticing her discomfort. He handed her his coat. "Put this on." "But what about you?" "I'm fine," he insisted. "Please take it." The simple act of kindness brought unexpected tears to Mira's eyes. No one had ever put her comfort before their own. As they traveled, Graham began to tell her stories about the places he had visited with his mother before she died. Paris with its grand buildings, London W with its foggy streets, New York with its bustling energy. He painted pictures with his words that made Mira feel as though she were there. "One day you'll see these places yourself," he promised. "Do you really believe that?" Mira asked. "That I could go anywhere I want? Do anything I want?" "I do," Graham said with such conviction that Mira almost believed it too. By the third day of their journey, they had fallen into a rhythm, traveling by night, hiding by day. They were making good progress, but Graham was increasingly worried about their pursuers. "They're still behind us," he said as they set up their camp that morning. "I saw smoke from their campfires when we crossed that ridge." Mira's heart sank. "Will we make it to Tennessee before they catch up?" "We have to," Graham said grimly. "We're almost there." That day, as they rested, Graham taught Mira how to use the pistol. Her hands trembled as she held it. "I don't think I could shoot anyone," she admitted. "I pray you won't have to," Graham said. "But I want you to be able to protect yourself if something happens to me." The thought of something happening to Graham made Mira's chest tighten painfully. In just a few days, he had become her entire world, her protector, her friend, and something more that she couldn't quite name. As they prepared to set out again that evening, Graham studied a worn map by the light of a small lantern. "We should reach Cooper's farm by tomorrow night," he said, tracing the route with his finger. "Once we're there, we can rest properly before deciding our next move." "What will that be?" Mira asked. "Where will we go after Tennessee?" Graham looked up from the map, his expression uncertain. "I thought perhaps Ohio or Pennsylvania. There are communities there where you'd be safe. Or..." He hesitated. "We could go further. Canada, maybe." "We?" Mira repeated softly. Graham's eyes met hers. "Yes, we. Unless you'd rather go on alone. I would understand if..." "No," Mira interrupted quickly. "I don't want to be alone." Something shifted between them in that moment. An unspoken understanding that their fates were now intertwined. The fourth night of their journey brought disaster. They were crossing a shallow river when the cartwheel hit a rock and broke. The horse stumbled, and supplies scattered into the water. No! Graham waded into the river, trying to salvage what he could. Mira joined him, grabbing food packages and blankets before they were swept away. They managed to save most of their supplies, but the cart was beyond repair. The Horsey could still carry some of their things, but they would have to leave much behind and travel on foot. "This will slow us down," Graham said, his voice tight with worry as they repacked their belongings. "How far are we from your friend's farm?" "About 15 miles, Graham replied. "We can make it by tomorrow night if we push ourselves." But slowing down meant Edward Southwood's men were gaining on them. Twice that night they had to hide as riders passed, nearby. The search party was getting closer. Dawn was breaking when they reached the Tennessee border. Graham wanted to continue despite the daylight, but Mira was exhausted. They found a small cave formed by overhanging rocks and settled inside to rest. "Just a few hours," Graham agreed reluctantly. "Then we have to keep moving." They sat side by side in the cramped space, sharing a blanket against the morning chill. Mira found herself leaning against Graham, Aham's shoulder too tired to worry about propriety. "Tell me about your family," Graham said softly. "You mentioned a sister. Were there others?" Mira nodded, her eyes closed as memories washed over her. "My parents, my sister Sarah, and 2 younger brothers, Elijah and Caleb. We were separated 7 years ago when the plantation where we lived was sold. My father was sent to Louisiana, my mother and brothers to Carolina. Sarah and I came to Southwood Tog Ether, but then—" "She was sold," Graham finished when Mira's voice trailed off. "Yes, I was 15 when she left. She was such a beautiful girl. Master Edward said she'd fetch a good price in New Orleans." Mira's voice broke. "I've been alone ever since." Graham's arm went around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Mira looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were. She could see the stubble on his jaw, the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in her chest. "Why are you doing all this?" she whispered. "Risking everything for me?" Graham was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When I heard you that night, praying to belong to yourself, it was like hearing my own soul speak. I've never belonged to myself either, not really. Always being who my father wanted, doing what was expected. But in that moment I knew I had to help you. And in helping you, maybe I could find my own freedom too." Their eyes held, and for a heartbeat, Mira thought he might kiss her. But a sound outside the cave made them both freeze. "Did you hear that?" Graham whispered, reaching for the pistol. Mira nodded, her heart pounding. Graham carefully moved to the entrance of their hiding place and peered out. "Riders," he said grimly. "At least 5 of them." "Your father's men?" "Yes, they're checking the area." Graham turned back to her, his face grave. "We need to be absolutely silent until they pass." They huddled together in the darkness of the cave, barely breathing as the sounds of horses and men grew closer. Through a small gap in the rocks, Mira could see them, rough-looking men with guns led by Lockwood, the Southwood overseer. "Spread out," Lockwood ordered. "They can't be far. The boss wants them found today." The men dismounted and began to search the area. One of them walked directly toward their hiding place. Graham's hand tightened around the pistol. Mira closed her eyes, praying harder than she ever had before. The man was just feet away from discovering them when a shout came from across the clearing. "Tracks! Over here! Heading north!" The man turned away, hurrying to join his companions. Minutes later, the search party remounted and rode off, following the false trail. Graham and Mira remained frozen until the sounds of hooves faded completely. Only then did they release the breaths they'd been holding. "That was too close," Graham whispered. "We can't stay here." Despite their exhaustion, they gathered their few belongings and set out again, keeping to the densest parts of the forest. The day was hot, and walking was difficult through the undergrowth, but fear kept them moving. By late afternoon, they reached a small stream where they stopped to refill their water containers. Mira splashed the cool water on her face and neck, trying to wash away the grime of travel. "How much further?" she asked. "Not far now," Graham replied, studying the position of the sun. "Maybe 5 miles. We should reach Cooper's farm after nightfall." As they rested by the stream, Graham suddenly stiffened, his head turning sharply. "What is it?" Mira asked. "I thought I heard—" He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a large boulder just as a gunshot rang out. "There they are!" a voice shouted. "Get them!" More shots followed, the bullets splintering bark from trees near their hiding place. Graham pushed the pistol into Mira's hands. "Stay here," he ordered. "If anyone comes near you, use it." "What are you going to do?" Mira asked, terrified. "Create a distraction. When I do, run north. Keep the sunset on your left. You'll reach a road eventually. Follow it until you see a farm with a red barn. That's Cooper's place. Tell him who you are and what happened. He'll help you." "I'm not leaving you," Mira protested. Graham cupped her face in his hands. "You have to. This is your chance for freedom. Take it. Take." Before she could argue further, Graham pressed his lips to hers in a brief, desperate kiss. Then he was gone, darting into the trees away from their hiding place. "Over there!" someone yelled, and the gunfire followed Graham. Mira wanted to run after him, but his words echoed in her mind. This was her chance for freedom, the thing she had prayed for. With tears streaming down her face, she did as he said, heading north while keeping the setting sun on her left. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, the sounds of pursuit fading behind her. As darkness fell, she reached a dirt road just as Graham had promised. Full lowing it, she eventually saw lights in the distance, a farmhouse with a red barn beside it. Cooper's farm. Gathering her courage, Mira approached the house and knocked on the door. It was opened by a tall man with kind eyes and graying hair. "Yes?" he asked, looking at her with concern. "Can I help you?" "Are you James Cooper?" Mira's voice trembled. "I am. Graham Southwood sent me. We were being chased, and he stayed behind to distract them." Under, standing, dawned on Cooper's face. "Come in quickly," he said, ushering her inside and closing the door. "My wife will get you something to eat and dry clothes. Tell me what happened." In the warmth of the Cooper kitchen, Mira told the whole story, how she and Graham had escaped, their journey north and the ambush at the stream. By the time she finished, she was shaking with exhaustion and fear for Graham. "We have to help him," she pleaded. Cooper nodded grimly. "I'll gather some men and we'll go look for him, but you need to rest. You're safe here." Mrs. Cooper, a gentle woman with silver-streaked hair, led Mira to a small bedroom. For the first time in her life, Mira slept in a real bed with clean sheets. But despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Graham's face as he left her, determined, fearful, and something else, something that made her heart ache. She woke to the sound of voices. It was still dark outside, but dawn wasn't far off. Slipping out of bed, Mira crept to the bedroom door and listened. "We found him about 2 miles south of here," Cooper was saying. "He'd been shot twice." Mira's heart seemed to stop. "Is he alive?" Mrs. Cooper asked, voicing the question Mira couldn't. "Barely. We've put him in the back room. I've sent for Doc Wilson, but—" Mira didn't wait to hear more. She rushed past him into the hallway, looking frantically for the back room. Finding it, she pushed open the door and froze. Graham lay on a narrow bed, his face deathly pale. His shirt had been removed, revealing blood-stained bandages wrapped around his chest and shoulder. His breathing was shallow and labored. "Graham," Mira whispered, moving to his side. She took his hand gently, shocked at how cold it felt. Cooper appeared in the doorway behind her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We did what we could for him, but the bullets are still in there. He needs a doctor." "Will he come? The doctor?" "He's a good man. He won't ask questions." Mira didn't take her eyes off Graham's face. "And Lockwood, your father's men. They followed a false trail south. They think you both escaped that way, but they'll figure it out eventually. We need to be ready to move you both when Graham is stable enough." "If he gets stable enough," Mika, Ra said, her voice breaking. Cooper put a hand on her shoulder. "Have faith, Graham is strong." Left alone with Graham, Mira pulled a chair close to his bedside and held his hand between both of hers, trying to warm it. "You can't die," she told him fiercely. "Not after everything we've been through, not when we're so close to freedom." She didn't know if he could hear her, but she kept talking anyway. telling him about the soft bed Mrs. Cooper had given Shear, about the farm that looked so peaceful in the moonlight, about all the places they would go together once he was well. Dawn was breaking when Graham's fingers twitched in hers. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. "Mira." His voice was barely audible. "I'm here," she said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "You're at Cooper's farm. You're safe." Graham's eyes focused on her face. "You made it," he whispered. "You're free." "We made it," Mira corrected him. "And we're going to stay that way. The doctor is coming to help you." A ghost of a smile touched Graham's lips. "I told you I'd get you to Tennessee." "Yes, you did. And now you need to get well so we can decide where to go next." Graham's eyes began to close again, exhaustion claiming him. But before he drifted off, he murmured, "I think I'm already where I want to be." Mira stayed by his side as the morning light filled the room. Outside of the window, she could see the Tennessee countryside stretching toward the horizon, rolling hills and fields touched by the golden glow of sunrise. She thought about Graham's words and realized she felt the same way. After a lifetime of belonging to others, of dreaming of escape, she had found something she hadn't expected. A place where she wanted to stay. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that choice had everything to do with the man lying before her. The sound of hooves outside announced the arrival of the doctor. Mira squeezed Graham's hand one more time before going to the door. "Hold on," she whispered. "Our story isn't over yet." Dr. Wilson arrived at Cooper's farm just as the sun cleared the horizon. He was an older man with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. James Cooper met him at the door and quickly explained the situation. "Gunshot wounds, you say?" Dr. Wilson asked, following Cooper down the hallway. "The less I know about how it happened, the better." When they entered the room, Mira was still sitting beside Graham, holding his hand. She looked up with desperate hope in her eyes. "This is the young lady I mentioned," Cooper said quietly, "and this is my friend who needs your help." Dr. Wilson nodded and set his medical bag on the bedside table. "I'll need to examine him. Perhaps you could wait outside, miss." "I'm staying," Mira said firmly. The doctor studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. I'll need hot water, clean cloths, and as much light as you can give me." Mrs. Cooper hurried to bring the requested items, while the doctor carefully removed the bandages from Graham's wounds. He probed gently at the entry points, his expression grave. "One bullet went through his shoulder," he said, "but the other is still inside, near his lungi. I need to remove it before infection sets in." "Can you do that?" Mira asked, her voice shaking. "I've done it before during the war," Dr. Wilson replied, "but I won't lie to you, it's risky. He's already lost a lot of blood." "Do whatever you need to do," Mira said. "Just save him." The next hour was the longest of Mira's life. She assisted the doctor, handing him instruments and holding cloths to soak up the blood as he worked to extract the bullet from Graham's chest. Graham remained unconscious, which was a blessing given the pain he would have felt. Finally, Dr. Wilson held up a small, misshapen piece of lead. "Got it," he said, dropping the bullet into a bowl with a metallic clink. He worked quickly to clean and stitch both wounds, then wrapped fresh bandages around Graham's chest and shoulder. "Now we wait," he said, washing blood from his hands in a basin. "The next 24 hours are critical. If infection doesn't set in, he has a chance." "Thank you," Mira whispered. Dr. Wilson packed up his instruments. "I'll leave medicine for the pain and fever. Keep the wounds clean, change the bandages twice a day, and get some broth into him if he wakes." As Cooper showed the doctor out, Mrs. Cooper brought a fresh basin of water and a clean cloth. "You should rest," she told Mira gently. "I can sit with him." But Mira shook her head. "I need to be here when he wakes up." Mrs. Cooper didn't argue. Instead, she squeezed Mira's shoulder and said, "I'll bring you something to eat then." Left alone with Graham, Mira used the cloth to wipe the sweat from his brow. His skin was hot to the touch, the fever already beginning. "You have to fight," she told him. "You've come too far to give up now." Throughout that day and into the night, Mira stayed by Graham's side. When fever made him thrash and moan, she held him down to prevent him from tearing his stitches. When nightmares made him call out, she soothed him with soft words and gentle touches. In his delirium, Graham spoke of many things: his mother, his childhood, his dreams of a different life. And he spoke of Mira, calling her name again and again. "I'm here," she would answer each time. "I'm right here." Dawn was breaking on the second day when Graham's fever finally broke. His breathing became more regular and his sleep more peaceful. Exhausted, Mira laid her head on the edge of the bed and closed her eyes for just a moment. She woke to the feeling of fingers gently stroking her hair. Looking up, she found Graham watching her, his eyes clear for the first time in days. "You stayed," he said, his voice weak but steady. Tears filled Mira's eyes. "Of course I stayed. How long was I—" He tried to shift position and winced at the pain. "Don't move," Mira said quickly. "You were shot twice. The doctor removed the bullets, but you've been feverish for almost 2 days. Graham's eyes moved around the room. "Cooper's farm?" "Yes. We're safe for now." A small smile touched his lips. "We made it." "You almost didn't," Mira said, unable to keep the emotion from her voice. "Why did you do that? Why did you risk your life for me?" Graham looked at her for a long moment. "Because you're worth it," he said simply. The door opened before Mira could respond. James Cooper entered, relief washing over his face when he saw Graham awake. "Welcome back," he said. "You had us worried." "Sorry about that," Graham replied weakly. "Thank you for taking us in." Cooper pulled up a chair. "We need to talk about what happens next. Your father's men are still searching the area. They've been asking questions in town, offering rewards for information." Graham's jaw tightened. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," Cooper admitted. "Once you're strong enough to travel, you'll need to move on. I have friends in Ohio who can help you get farther north." "How long until I can travel?" Graham asked. "At least a week, maybe more," Mira answered before Cooper could. "You're not going anywhere until you're stronger." Graham tried to argue, but exhaustion quickly overtook him. As his eyes drifted closed, Cooper motioned for Mira to follow him out of the room. In the kitchen, Mrs. Cooper was preparing breakfast. The smell of coffee and biscuits filled the air, reminding Mira how hungry she was. "Sit, eat," Mrs. Cooper insisted, placing a plate in front of her. "You need your strength too." As Mira ate, Cooper explained their situation in more detail. "Edward Southwood is offering $500 for information about your whereabouts. It's a small fortune in these parts." "Will someone tell him we're here?" Mira asked, fear creeping back into her voice. "My neighbors are good people," Cooper said, "but money can tempt even good people. That's why you can't stay too long." "Graham can't be moved yet," Mira protested. "I know, but we need to be prepared." Cooper spread a map on the table. "There's a settlement in Ohio just north of Cincinnati. Escaped slaves and free black people live there together. You'd be safe." Mira stared at the map at the long distance between Tennessee and Ohio. "What about Graham? What will happen to him?" Cooper and his wife exchanged a glance. "That depends," Mrs. Cooper said gently, "on what you both want." Over the next few days, as Graham grew stronger, Mira helped around the farm. She worked in the garden with Mrs. Cooper, learning the names of plants she had never seen before. She helped in the kitchen, discovering she had a talent for baking bread. And each night, she slept in a chair beside Graham's bed. Despite Mrs. Cooper's insistence that she use the guest room on the 4th day, Graham was well enough to sit up and eat solid food. By the 5th, he could stand with help and take a few steps around the room. "You're recovering faster than I expected," Mira told him as she changed his bandages one morning. "I have good reason to get better," Graham replied, watching her face as she worked. Her fingers were gentle against his skin, and he found himself holding his breath whenever she came close. "Cooper says we'll need to leave soon," Mira said, securing the fresh bandage with a pin. "Your father's men are still searching. Where will we go?" The question held more meaning than just their physical destination. Mira hesitated. "Cooper mentioned a settlement in Ohio. Is that where you want to go?" She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I want to be free. Beyond that, I haven't had much chance to think about what I want." Graham caught her hand as she pulled away. "Mira, when this started, I promised to take you to freedom. I've kept that promise. Now you have choices you never had before." If Ohio is where you want to go, I'll get you there safely. But after that... After that? What? Mira asked, her heart beating faster. After that, you might not need me anymore. The thought sent a chill through Mira. Is that what you want? To go your separate ways once we reach Ohio? No, Graham said quietly. That's not what I want at all. Their eyes held, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of feelings that had grown during their journey, feelings neither had dared to name. The sound of a horse galloping into the farmyard broke the moment. Cooper's voice called out urgently from the front of the house. They're coming. Southwood's men are on their way. Mira rushed to the window. In the distance, she could see a cloud of dust on the road, Heirs approaching fast. Cooper appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Someone in town must have talked. We have maybe 15 minutes before they get here. We need to go, Graham said, already trying to stand. He swayed on his feet, still weak from his injuries. You're not strong enough, Mira argued. We don't have a choice. Graham's voice was firm. Cooper, is there a back way out? Through the orchard, Cooper replied. I've got a wagon hidden in the old barn. My wife is packing food now. Moving as quickly as Graham's condition would allow, they gathered their few belongings. Mrs. Cooper pressed a bundle of food and a small pouch of money into Mira's hands. Go north, she said. Follow the North Star at night. Keep to the woods during the day. There are people who will help you. Look for a quilt hanging on a porch or a lantern in a window. Within minutes, they were in the wagon, hidden under a CANVA's cover. Cooper drove them through the orchard and onto a narrow track that led away from the main road. This will take you to Mitchell's Creek, he explained. Follow it north for about 5 miles, then head east until you reach the Springfield Road. My cousin has a place there, the house with the blue door. Tell him I sent you. Thank you, Graham said, gripping Cooper's hand, for everything. God go with you both, Cooper replied. Then, with a snap of the reins, he sent the horses forward and turned back toward his farm. Under the canvas, Mira held Graham steady as the wagon bounced over rough ground. His face was pale with pain, but his eyes were determined. We'll make it, he assured her. They followed Mitchell's Creek as Cooper had instructed, stopping only when Graham needed to rest. By nightfall, they had reached the Springfield Road and found the house with the blue door. Cooper's cousin, a quiet man named William, took them in without question. He gave them a small room at the back of his house and promised to help them continue their journey north once Graham was stronger. For 3 days, they stayed with William. Graham's strength returned gradually, and by the 4th day he insisted he was well enough to travel again. Are you sure? Mira asked, concern written on her face. I'm sure, Graham replied. The longer we stay in one place, the more dangerous it becomes. William provided them with a small cart and a mule, along with directions to the next safe house on their journey north. As they prepared to leave, Mira noticed Graham was unusually quiet. What's wrong? She asked, as they loaded their belongings into the cart. Graham hesitated, then said, Before we go, there's something I need to tell you. He led her to a quiet spot beneath an apple tree in William's yard. The afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground with patches of light. When we started this journey, Graham began, I had a clear purpose, to help you reach freedom, but somewhere along the way, something changed. I changed. Mira watched his face, her heart racing. I've been thinking about what happens when we reach Ohio, Graham continued. About what you said, that you haven't had a chance to think about what you want. I don't want to take any more seahorses away from you. What are you saying? Mira asked softly. Graham took her hands in his. I'm saying that when we reach Ohio, you'll be truly free. Free to go wherever you want, do whatever you want. And if that means we part ways, I'll understand. Mira felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Is that what you want? No, Graham said, his voice dropping to a whisper. What I want is to ask you to stay with me. But I don't have the right to ask that. Why not? Because you've never had a choice before. How can I ask you to choose me when you've just begun to experience freedom? Mira stepped closer to him. Graham Southwood, Do you think so little of me that you believe I don't know my own mind? Surprise flickered across his face. Of course not. Then trust me to know what I want. Mira's voice was steady now, filled with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. For the first time in my life, I can choose my own path, and I choose you. Not because I need your protection, not because I'm grateful, but because... She paused, gathering her courage. Because I love you, she finished simply. Graham's expression transformed, hope replacing uncertainty. Mira, are you sure? The world will not be kind to us. I'm sure, she said. Are you? In answer, Graham pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Unlike their first desperate kiss by the stream, this one was gentle, a promise rather than a goodbye. When they broke apart, Graham rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I think I have since that night I heard you pray. A throat clearing behind them made them turn. William stood there, a knowing smile on his weathered face. If you two are finished, he said, it's time you were on your way. Daylight's wasting. They set out just before noon, heading north on the Springfield Road. Their plan was to travel to Cincinnati, then cross the Ohio River into free territory. From there, they would make their way to the settlement Cooper had told them about. The journey was slow. Graham's wounds still pained him, and they had to be cautious, avoiding towns and main roads whenever possible. But for the first time, there was a lightness between them, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. At night, as they camped in hidden spots away from the road, they talked about the future. Their future. Graham spoke of his dream to build a home somewhere in the north, perhaps start a small business. I've never worked with my hands, he admitted, but I'm willing to learn. And I've never not worked with my hands, Mira said with a smile. So between us, we should manage. They also spoke of harder things, of the challenges they would face as a mixed couple, of the danger that would follow them as long as Edward Southwood lived, of Mira's hope to someday find her lost family. We'll find them, Graham promised. Once we're settled, we'll start searching. 5 days into their journey, they reached the outskirts of Cincinnati. They could see the Ohio River in the distance, its waters representing the boundary between slave territory and freedom. We're almost there, Graham said, squeezing Mira's hand. But as they approached the city, they noticed increased patrols on the roads. Men on horseback stopped wagons and carriages, checking faces against descriptions. Slave catchers, Graham said grimly, and probably some of my father's men too. They retreated to a small copse of trees to reconsider their plan. The river crossing would be heavily watched, especially at the bridges and official ferry crossings. We need another way across, Graham said, studying the river from their hiding place. An elderly black man leading a mule-drawn cart passed near their hiding spot. Something about the way he deliberately slowed as he passed made Graham curious. Wait here, he told Mira, and stepped out onto the road. The old man stopped his cart immediately. Fine day for traveling, he remarked, though dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. Yes, though the crossing looks difficult, Graham replied carefully. The old man nodded. Some Crow Sings are harder than others, depends on where you try to pass. Understanding dawned on Graham. Would you know of a good place to cross? The man looked around to ensure no one was listening. There's a man called Brother John who lives in the blue house by the Willow Bend, 2 miles east. Tell him Isaiah sent you. He helps travelers find their way north. Thank you, Graham said. God bless you. And you, the man replied, then continued on his way as if nothing had happened. Graham returned to Mira and explained what he had learned. They decided to seek out this Brother John and hope he was part of the network of people who helped escaped slaves reach freedom. They found the blue house as the sun was setting. Brother John turned out to be a tall, thin white man with a solemn face and quick, intelligent eyes. He invited them inside without hesitation once Graham mentioned Isaiah's name. You're looking to cross? He asked, offering them seats at his kitchen table. Yes, Graham replied, but the patrols are heavy. Brother John nodded. Edward Southwood's offering $1,000 now for his son and the woman who escaped with him. Word travels. Mira's hand found Graham's under the table. Can you help us? Graham asked. I can, Brother John said, but not tonight. There's a storm coming and the river will be dangerous. Tomorrow night, if the Heir clears, we'll make the crossing. He showed them to a hidden room beneath his house, accessed through a trapdoor under a rug. You'll be safe here, he assured them. No one knows about this place except those who need to. The small room was clean but sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a small table with a lamp and a single chair. Brother John brought them food and fresh water, then left them to rest. Alone in the hidden room, Mira sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by how far they had come and how close they were to freedom, real freedom. This time tomorrow, we could be in free territory, she said softly. Graham sat beside her, taking her hand. Are you scared? Yes, she admitted, but not of crossing the river. I'm scared of what comes after, of building a life. I've never been allowed to do that before. We'll build it together, Graham promised, one day at a time. Outside, T. Hunter rumbled as the storm approached. Mira leaned against Graham's shoulder, drawing comfort from his presence. When we're safe, she said quietly, when we're truly free, would you marry me? Graham looked at her in surprise. Shouldn't I be the one asking you that question? A small smile curved Mira's lips. You said I get to make my own choices now. This is my choice. Graham's eyes filled with emotion. Then yes, he said. I would be honored to marry you. As the storm raged outside, they held each other close in the small hidden room, two people who had risked everything for freedom and found love along the way. Morning brought clear skies and renewed hope. Brother John informed them that they would cross that night, during the darkest hours when the patrols were thinnest. I have contacts on the other side, he explained. They'll meet us and take you to a safe house. The day passed slowly. Maya A. and Graham remained in the hidden room, speaking in whispers and listening to the occasional footsteps above. Brother John brought them a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and apples, along with dark clothes to wear for the crossing. Wear these tonight, he said, less chance of being seen. As midnight approached, Brother John came to get them. It's time, he said. Follow me and stay quiet. They emerged from the house into a moonless night. Brother Joe H.N. led them through back gardens and narrow alleys until they reached the riverbank at a secluded spot well away from the docks and bridges. A small rowboat was pulled up on the shore, hidden among the reeds. Brother John pointed to it. That's our transport. It's not much, but it will get us across. They pushed the boat into the water and climbed in carefully. Brother John took the oars and began to row with practiced strokes, keeping close to the shore where the shadows were deepest. The river was wider than it had looked from a distance, and the current was strong. Brother John strained against it, his face glistening with sweat despite the cool night air. Keep your eyes open, he whispered. Patrol boats sometimes come through here. Halfway across, they heard the sound of approaching oars. Brother John immediately stopped rowing and guided their boat into a patch of reeds near the shore. Don't move, he breathed. Not a sound. They huddled in the small boat, barely daring to breathe as a patrol boat passed no more than 20 yards away. The lantern on its bow swept across the water, the light stopping just short of their hiding place. Once the patrol was gone, Brother John resumed rowing with renewed urgency. They'll circle back this way soon, he said. We need to hurry. The Ohio shore grew closer, a dark line against the night sky. Just as they were about to reach it, a shout came from somewhere behind them. There, on the water! A lantern beam cut through the darkness, finding their boat. Row, Graham urged. We're almost there. Brother John bent to the oars with all his strength. The boat surged forward, hitting the shore with a jolt that nearly threw them overboard. Run, Brother John commanded, leaping from the boat. Head for the trees! Friends are waiting! They scrambled up the muddy bank, slipping and stumbling in their haste. Behind them, they could hear the patrol boat reaching the shore, men shouting as they gave chase. The trees loomed ahead, a dense forest that promised concealment. Mira's lungs burned as she ran, Graham's hand gripping hers tightly. Just as they reached the tree line, a shot rang out. Graham stumbled, crying out in pain. Graham! Mira screamed, trying to catch him as he fell. Keep going, he gasped, clutching his leg where the bullet had struck. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you, Mira declared, pulling his arm around her shoulders to support him. Together, they staggered into the forest, following Brother John, who moved with surprising speed despite his age. Behind them, the shouts grew closer as their pursuers gained ground. "There!" Brother John pointed ahead. "The clearing!" In the small moonlit clearing stood a wagon with 2 men beside it. When they saw the fleeing group, they rushed forward to help. "Quickly!" one of them said, helping Mira get Graham into the wagon. "They're right behind you." Brother John turned to face the way they had come. "Go," he told the wagon driver. "I'll hold them off." "John, no," Graham protested weakly. "This is my choice," Brother John said firmly. "Now go. Live free." As the wagon pulled away, Mira looked back to see Brother John standing at the edge of the clearing, a rifle in his hands, ready to face those who would deny others their freedom. The wagon bounced and jolted along a rough forest path, each movement causing Graham to wince in pain. Mira tore strips from her petticoat to bind his wound, working as best she could in the darkness. "How bad is it?" one of the men asked. "The bullet went through his calf," Mira replied. "It's bleeding badly, but I think it missed the bone." "We've got a doctor waiting at the safe house," the man assured her. "He'll be all right." As they emerged from the forest onto a wider road, Mira looked back the way they had come. There was no sign of pursuit, no torches or lanterns visible in the darkness. "Did we make it?" she asked, hardly daring to believe. "Are we in free territory now?" The wagon driver nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Welcome to Ohio." Free territory. Mira let the words wash over her, their meaning almost too big to comprehend. She looked at Graham, who despite his pain was watching her with a smile. "We did it," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "You're free." Mira shook her head, tears blurring her vision as she squeezed his hand. "No," she corrected gently. "We're free." The wagon traveled through the night, keeping to less traveled roads. Graham drifted in and out of consciousness, his face pale in the moonlight. Mira held his hand tightly, willing him to hold on. "How much further?" she asked the driver. "Not far now," he replied. "Just over that ridge." As dawn broke, they crested a small hill. Below them lay a cluster of simple houses and buildings surrounding a white church. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even at this early hour, people could be seen going about their business. "Welcome to New Hope," the driver said. "It's not much to look at, but it's free land. Everyone here either escaped like you or believes in the cause." They drove down the main street, drawing curious glances from the townspeople. The wagon stopped in front of a modest 2-story house with a sign that read, "Dr. Samuel Freeman." The doctor was already waiting at the door, a tall BL-AC man with intelligent eyes and graying hair at his temples. "Bring him inside," he instructed, helping to carry Graham into the house. Mira followed them into a clean, well-lit room that served as the doctor's surgery. Graham was placed on a table, and Dr. Freeman immediately began examining his wound. "The bullet went through cleanly," he confirmed after a few minutes. "But he's lost a lot of blood and there's some infection starting. We need to clean the wound thoroughly." Mira stayed by Graham's side as the doctor worked, holding his hand and whispering encouragement when the pain made him cry out. Finally, the wound was cleaned, stitched, and bandaged. "He needs rest now," Dr. Freeman said, washing his hands in a basin. "And so do you by the look of it. There's a room upstairs where you can both stay until he's recovered." "Thank you," Mira said, her voice thick with emotion. "How can we ever repay you?" The doctor smiled. "By living free and helping others do the same when your time comes." A woman named Ruth, the doctor's wife, showed Mira to a small but comfortable room on the 2nd floor. Graham was carried up and settled in the bed, still unconscious but breathing steadily. "I'll bring you some food," Ruth said kindly, "and some clean clothes. You look about my daughter's size." Left alone with Graham, Mira sank into a chair beside the bed. Exhaustion washed over her in waves, but she fought to stay awake, watching the rise and fall of Graham's chest. "We made it," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "We're really here." The room had a window that overlooked the town square. Mira could see people going about their day, women hanging laundry, men repairing buildings, children playing. Black and white faces mingled freely. It was like nothing she had ever seen before. Ruth returned with a tray of food, a dress, and some basic toiletries. "Eat, then rest," she insisted. "The doctor will check on your young man regularly. He's in good hands." Mira ate hungrily, suddenly aware of how long it had been since her last meal. The food was simple but delicious: fresh bread, cheese, and stew that warmed her from the inside. After washing and changing into the clean dress, she curled up in a chair next to Graham's bed, intending to watch over him. But exhaustion soon claimed her, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the feeling of someone stroking her hair. Opening her eyes, she found Graham awake, watching her with a tender smile. "There you are," he said softly. "Graham." She sat up quickly, wincing at the stiffness in her neck from sleeping in the chair. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot," he replied with a weak laugh that turned into a grimace. "But I'll live thanks to you." Mira moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking his hand in hers. "We're in Ohio," she told him, "in a town called New Hope. The doctor says you're going to be fine, but you need to rest." Graham looked around the room, then back at Mira. "We really did it," he said with wonder in his voice. "You're free." "We're free," she corrected him, just as she had in the wagon. His eyes softened as he looked at her. "Yes, we are. Free to build whatever life we want to." For the next week, Graham regained his strength under Dr. Freeman's care. Mira rarely left his side, except to help Ruth with household chores or to explore the small town that was to be their new home. New Hope was a community of about 300 people. Nearly half of them escaped slaves who had found their way north. The rest were abolitionists who had dedicated their lives to helping those seeking freedom. They welcomed Mira and Graham with open arms, offering friendship and support. 10 days after their arrival, Graham was strong enough to walk with the aid of a cane. Dr. Freeman pronounced him well on the way to recovery, though it would be some time before he could travel or work. "What will you do now?" the doctor asked them over dinner that evening. Graham and Mira exchanged a glance. "We haven't decided yet," Graham admitted. "I have some money saved, enough to buy a small piece of land perhaps." "You could stay here," Ruth suggested. "We always need good people in New Hope." The idea appealed to both of them. After so much running, the thought of putting down roots was tempting. "I'd need to find work," Graham said. "I don't know much about farming, but I'm willing to learn." "I hear the school needs a teacher," Dr. Freeman mentioned. "You're educated, aren't you?" Graham nodded. "I studied at Harvard before my mother died. My father called me home after that." "A Harvard man?" Dr. Freeman looked impressed. "Yes, you'd be perfect for the position." "And what about me?" Mira asked. "I want to contribute too." Ruth smiled warmly. "Can you sew?" "Yes, very well," Mira replied. "It was one of my duties on the plantation." "Then you could help with the quilting circle," Ruth said. "It's more than just making blankets. Each quilt we create contains a code, patterns that help guide escaped slaves no wrath." Mira's eyes widened. "I'd be honored to be part of that." As they discussed their future, a knock came at the door. Dr. Freeman answered it to find one of the town's lookouts, a young man named Eli. "Riders coming from the south," Eli reported breathlessly. 6 men armed. One of them matches the description of Edward Southwood." Mira felt the blood drain from her face. Graham reached for her hand, his expression grim. "How did he find us?" he whispered. "Doesn't matter," Dr. Freeman said decisively. "We need to get you two hidden now." The town of New Hope had faced slave catchers before. Every house had a hiding place, and the community had signals and plans in place. Within minutes, Mira and Graham were being led through a tunnel that connected the doctor's house to the church across the street. "Stay in the bell tower," Dr. Freeman instructed. "There's a false wall that conceals a small room. No one will find you there." "But what about you?" Mira asked, concerned. "If my father identifies you as helping us—" "Don't worry about us," the doctor assured them. "This isn't the first time we've dealt with men like your father." The hidden room in the church bell tower was tiny but well stocked with water, food, and blankets. A small window, covered with a dark cloth, offered a view of the main street. Mira and Graham settled in to wait, listening to the sounds of horses and men entering the town. From their vantage point, they could see Edward Southwood dismount in front of the general store. He was accompanied by Lockwood and 4 other men, all armed with rifles and pistols. "Where is the town leader?" Edward demanded loudly. "I want to speak with whoever's in charge here." The town's mayor, a former slave named Moses Washington, approached calmly. "I'm the mayor of New Hope. How can I help you, see?" Edward towered over Moses, his face twisted with contempt. "I'm looking for my son and a slave woman who ran away with him. We tracked them to the Ohio River. We know they crossed near here." "Many people pass through our town," Moses replied evenly, "but I don't recall seeing anyone matching that description." "Don't lie to me," Edward snarled. "I'm offering $1,000 for information about their whereabouts." The townspeople who had gathered remained silent, their faces revealing nothing. "Search the houses," Edward ordered his men. "Start with that one." He pointed to Dr. Freeman's house. In the bell tower, Graham's hand tightened around Mira's. "If they find us—" "They won't," Mira whispered back, though her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure it could be heard across the street. They watched as Edward's men spread out, entering houses and buildings. Some of the townspeople protested, but the armed men ignored them. Dr. Freeman stood calmly on his porch as Lockwood and another man entered his home. Minutes stretched into an hour as the search continued. One by one, Edward's men returned to the street, shaking their heads. They had found nothing. Edward's face was red with fury. "They're here somewhere," he shouted. "I know it." "Mr. Southwood," Moses said firmly, "you have searched our town and found nothing. I must ask you and your MN to leave now." "Or what?" Edward sneered. "You'll make us." As if on cue, doors opened throughout the town. Men and women emerged, each carrying a rifle or shotgun. They didn't aim at Edward and his men, but the message was clear. New Hope would defend its own. Edward looked around, realizing he was outnumbered. For a moment, Mira thought he might order his men to attack anyway, but then his shoulders slumped slightly. "This isn't over," he said to Moses. "I'll be back with more men." "You won't find what you're looking for here," Moses replied. "Go home, Mr. Southwood. Your son has made his choice." Edward's face twisted with rage. No son of mine would choose a slave over his family, his inheritance, his position. If he's here, tell him he's dead to me. He's no longer a Southwood. With those bitter words, Edward mounted his horse and led his men out of town. The townspeople watched silently until they disappeared over the ridge. In the bell tower, Graham turned away from the window, his face unreadable. "Graham," Mira touched his arm gently. "Are you all right?" "He disowned me," Graham said quietly. "Not that it's a surprise. I knew it would happen when I chose to help you escape." "Do you regret it?" Mira asked, a trace of fear in her voice. Graham looked at her, his expression softening. "Not for a single moment. My father offered me wealth, positio N, power, all built on the suffering of others. You offered me love, honesty, and the chance to be a better man. There's no comparison." They remained in hiding until well after nightfall, when Dr. Freeman came to tell them it was safe to return to the house. "They've gone," he confirmed, "but they may come back with more men. You should consider moving on, at least for a while." "Where would we go?" Mira asked. "Canada," Graham suggested. "My father has no reach there. We'd be truly safe." The thought of leaving New Hope, the first place where Mira had felt welcome and free, was painful, but the risk of staying was too great. "When can we leave?" she asked. "There's a group heading north in 2 days," Dr. Freeman said. "You could join them." As they prepared for the journey to Canada, Mira had one request. "Before we go, I want to get married, here, with these people who helped us." Graham's face lit up. "Are you sure? It won't be legal in the eyes of the law." "It will be legal in the eyes of God," Mira replied, "and in the eyes of people who matter." The next day, in the simple white church of New Hope, Mira and Graham were married by Reverend Thomas, with the townspeople as witnesses. Mira wore a blue dress borrowed from Ruth's daughter, with wildflowers in her hair. Graham stood tall without his cane, determined to stand on his own for this important moment. "Do you, Graham, take Mira to be your wife?" Reverend Thomas asked. "To love, honor, and cherish in freedom and equality for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Graham said, his voice strong and clear. "And do you, Mira, take Graham to be your husband? To love, honor, and cherish in freedom and equality, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Meera replied, tears of joy shining in her eyes. "Then by the power vested in me by God and this community, I pronounce you husband and wife." The small church erupted in cheers as Graham and Meera sealed their vows with a kiss. It was a moment of pure joy in the midst of their dangerous journey, a promise of the life they would build together. The next morning, they joined a group of 20 people heading for Canada. The caravan consisted of several wagons, all loaded with supplies and belongings. Among the travelers were 3 families of escaped Slavees and several abolitionists who were relocating to continue their work from across the border. "It's about a 2-week journey," their guide, a man named Frederick, explained. "We'll travel by day and camp at safe houses along the way." Meera and Graham were given a small wagon of their own, along with provisions and gifts from the people of New Hope: quilts, cooking utensils, tools, and seeds for starting a garden in their new home. "Thank you for everything, G," Meera said to Ruth and Dr. Freeman as they prepared to leave. "We'll never forget you." "Go with God," Ruth replied, embracing her. "And remember, there's always a place for you here if you need it." The journey to Canada was long but uneventful. They crossed into British territory on a clear autumn day, the maple trees blazing with red and gold. As they crossed the border, a weight seemed to lift from Meera's shoulders. Here, at last, was a place where no one could claim ownership of another human being. They settled in a small town near Toronto, where a community of former slaves had established themselves. Graham found work as a teacher in the local school, while Meera started a small dressmaking business. They bought a modest house on the edge of town, with enough land for a garden and perhaps someday room for children to play. 6 months after their arrival in Canada, a letter arrived from Dr. Freeman. Graham read it aloud to Meera as they sat by the fire one evening. "Dear friends," he began, "I hope this letter finds you well and thriving in your new home. We have news that may bring you some peace. Edward Southwood suffered a stroke 2 months ago. He survived, but is much changed. He can no longer speak or walk, and the plantation is now managed by a cousin from Richmond. More importantly, we have heard through our network that Sarah Johnson, believed to be Meera's sister, has been located in New Orleans. She is well and working as a lady's maid to a French family. We are attempting to make contact and will write again when we have more information." Meera gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Sarah. They found Sarah." Graham continued reading. "The work continues here in New Hope. Since you left, we have helped 23 more souls reach freedom. Each one carries a part of your story with them, a reminder that courage and love can overcome even the darkest circumstances. You are often in our thoughts and prayers, your friends Samuel and Ruth Freeman." Meera wiped tears from her eyes. "I can't believe they found Sarah. After all these years, we'll bring her here," Graham promised. "And we'll keep searching for your parents and brothers too. We'll find them all, Meera." That night, as they lay in bed, Meera rested her head on Graham's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" he asked, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Are you?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Graham said. "When I heard you pray that night behind the smokehouse, asking to belong to no one but yourself, I never imagined where it would lead us." Meera smiled in the darkness. "I prayed to be seen," she said softly, "and you saw me. Not as a slave, not as someone to be owned, but as a person worthy of freedom and love." "And you saw me too," Graham replied, "not as a Southwood, not as my father's son, but as a man trying to find his own way." Outside their window, the stars shone brightly in the clear Canadian sky. Meera thought about the night she had knelt in the dirt behind the smokehouse, sending her desperate prayer into the darkness. She had asked for freedom, never daring to hope for love as well. Yet somehow, against all odds, she had found both. "What are you thinking about?" Graham asked. "Notice." In her thoughtful expression, "About how far we've come," Meera replied, "and about that prayer. I asked to belong to no one but myself. And now?" Graham's voice held a hint of uncertainty. Meera raised herself up on one elbow to look into his eyes. "Now I belong to myself, and I've chosen to belong to you as well. Not as property, Not as something owned, but as an equal, as your wife, as the woman who loves you. Graham pulled her close. And I belong to you, freely and completely, for as long as we both shall live. As they held each other in the quiet of their new home, Mira thought about the journey that had brought them here, the desperate flight through the night, the dangers they had faced, the kindness of strangers who had become friends. It had been a journey from darkness into light, from whispered prayers to spoken vows, from owned to free. 1 year later, on a warm spring day, Mira stood at the E-train station, her heart pounding with anticipation. Graham stood beside her, holding their 6-month-old daughter, Grace. The train whistle blew as it pulled into the station, steam billowing around the platform. Passengers began to disembark, and then Mira saw her, older, more elegant, but unmistakably Sarah. "Sarah!" Mira called, waving frantically. The sisters' eyes met across the platform. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, hardly believing this moment had come. Then they were running, colliding in an embrace 7 years in the making. "Mira," Sarah sobbed, holding her sister tightly. "I thought I'd never see you again." "I never stopped looking for you," Mira replied through her tears. Graham approached slowly, giving the sisters their moment before joining them. "Welcome to Canada, Sarah," he said warmly. "Welcome to freedom." Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at the baby in Graham's arms. "Is this your niece?" Mira said proudly. "Grace Sarah Southwood." Sarah gently touched the baby's cheek. "She's beautiful." Then she looked between Mira and Graham, her expression wondering. "When Dr. Freeman's people found me and told me about you two, I could hardly believe it. A Southwood and a Johnson. Love finds a way," Graham said simply. As they walked from the station to the carriage that would take them home, Mira felt a sense of complete ion she had never known before. Her sister was here, her daughter was healthy, her husband was by her side, and they were living in freedom. That night, after Sarah had been settled in the guest room and Grace was asleep in her cradle, Mira stepped outside onto the porch of their home. The night was clear, the stars brilliant against the dark sky. She closed her eyes and remembered the feel of Georgia soil beneath her fingers, the whispered prayer that had changed her life. Graham joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. "What are you doing out here?" he asked. "Saying thank you," Mira replied, leaning back against him. "For answered prayers, for freedom, for you." Graham's arms encircled her waist, pulling her close. "I used to think freedom meant being able to go wherever you wanted, do whatever you pleased," he said thoughtfully. "But now I know it's something deeper. It's the freedom to love, to choose, to build a life that's truly your own." Mira turned in his arms to face him. In the soft light from the windows, his face was as dear to her as her own heartbeat. "From whispers in the dark," she said softly, "to a life in the light." Graham smiled and lowered his lips to hers, sealing with a kiss the journey that had begun with a prayer and a promise on a Georgia night long ago. The end.